Hello friends of YouTube, welcome back to Mike Reads the World. Today I will be discussing, as I stated in the last video, Blanca, Olmedo, Lucila, Gamero de Medina is the author from Honduras in Central America. And this video is going to be unique, as I also mentioned, because this book, I do not believe, from what I could find, this book is not available in English. So this is, I believe, the only book in this project that's going to be like that. So, it feels a bit strange to be talking about a book that's only available in Spanish on a channel where I'm talking about every book in English. And I considered that doing this video in Spanish, but since the rest of my videos are in English, I want to keep keep the format somewhat standard. So the best way I thought to approach this is to introduce this book as a fine choice, as a book to learn Spanish with if you are interested in Spanish as a literary language. If you're doing a Reading the World challenge, you're not going to have many options for Honduras. And this is, if you're looking to try to read the classic works of each country, well, one, Spanish is a great language to learn because you're going to have, at least 20, more than 20 countries, I believe, that you'll be able to read the books in their original language that you wouldn't have otherwise. Also, this book was written in 1908, and the author has kind of an interesting story. Says Lucila Gamero de Medina was born June 12th, 1873 in Danlí. She got her degree in medicine and surgery in 1924. And this book was published in 1908. She wrote quite a few other books. This book deals heavily with the injustices, but it's primarily, injustices of the country through the religion and the courts. But it's primarily a romance novel. It's a novel about romance and friendship. It's not a literary great. I wouldn't read it a second time, but it's a very surface level, light reading kind of romance, a book about romance and friendships and kind of the people that are trying to tear all these things apart. The good people in the book are very much separated from the bad. There's only one real gray character, and you don't even really find out that this character is gray or kind of, changes from evil to good until the very end of the book. So it's, the characters are very, you could say, one-dimensional in that respect. And it's a book that on one hand I think is meant to entertain, in a sense that it's a romance, and it really, I'm just going to say, I think there's parts of this book that are overly long, but the good thing about that for somebody who's learning Spanish is that it's really going to repeat. It repeats itself a lot, and as you go through the chapters, you are not going to be left in any doubt about where the characters stand, who they are, especially if you're struggling, if you're just learning the language, going from like a beginner in Spanish to intermediate or advanced and like trying to read novels in Spanish. I recommend you have some basis, but if you're going kind of from that level to the next, this book is going to just repeat itself so much by the way the characters interact, the way they talk to each other is extremely, explicit. And in that sense also it feels like maybe if your primary language is Spanish, you might look at this book as like a young adult novel. Although I don't think Lucila Gamero de Medina wrote it with that intention. Perhaps she was writing to a literary level that most Hondurans would have had at the time, and that's nothing against Hondurans in the early 20th century, but I imagine, especially from this book, that the education system wasn't what it was today. And even the fact that our lead character, Blanca Olmedo, is the instructor of a young girl in a rich household, shows that to get a good education, you had to have a lot of money in a country that was not particularly wealthy at that time. So that leads me kind of into what the book is about. Blanca Olmedo is this woman who, her family has been rich, but they were pretty much robbed of all their fortunes. Her father was driven to death by this really corrupt judge who kind of scammed them out of all their money, left them destitute, but still is pursuing Blanca Olmedo because he desires her. Blanca Olmedo is going to be this figure in the book that, while her soul is pure, the men of the novel project their sort of desires and impurities on her the whole way through. I think there's 4 different men in this book that are going to be after her. She only loves one of them, which is Gustavo, the son of the, well, yeah, I won't say more than that, but the son of the, kind of the woman who owns the household, Doña Miquela. And Doña Miquela is kind of your typical, like, Mexican telenovela evil stepmother type of character in the beginning. And she's doing everything she can to keep, Blanca Olmedo in her place, remind her, you've got to know your place. I'm the high-class woman here. You're the low-class woman here. You're here to instruct my daughter, Adela. Adela loves Blanca Olmedo right away, and the bond between teacher and student, it becomes very strong and eventually develops into a friendship between Adela and Blanca Olmedo that's very strong. And as all these men are approaching Blanca, she's not quite interested in any of them. It's Gustavo, who is the cousin of Adela, allegedly, that that kind of makes her prefer Gustavo as well. So Gustavo is just the clear knight in shining armor in this book. However, you might be wondering, like, there's 2 ways this book can go, right? I mean, and with no in between. You can tell just by the way it's written. You can tell by how the story is. Either it's going to be a happily ever after, or it's going to be a Romeo and Juliet kind of tragedy. So, I guess if this sounds like something that's interesting to you and you want to pick this up to try to read it, like learn to read better in Spanish so that you can read the classics, this is a good book to do that for, especially if you're doing a Reading the World challenge, because this will prepare you for harder Spanish works to read down the road. And this book, it would be a great one to start out with or do early on in your Reading the World challenge so that you can build that Spanish up to read others. So I'm gonna give a few more spoilers after this for those who are just, maybe kind of watching my videos more out of curiosity about world literature. I think I have a few of those, like not necessarily looking to read all the books, but they kind of want a summary and are interested in like what is something from perhaps Honduras' most celebrated author. She's one of them for sure. And actually, I think this book even makes the claim that this might be the first book ever published, but it's definitely a classic within Honduras. So if you're just trying to get an idea of that, I will give a little bit more of the story and what happens and some more thoughts on it. But I feel like I've introduced it enough to where you can check it out for yourself. Maybe I'll just say among the other archetypes of the book. That's kind of important. The book looks at the corrupt nature of the church, the courts. So you have this judge, this kind of evil judge that's after her. You have the evil stepmother. You have the evil priest, but you also have a good priest. And then you also have another guy who loves Blanca Olmedo, but she doesn't really return his love. And there's actually a very interesting scene where Lucila Gamero de Medina kind of writes this man as, how should a man behave when his love is rejected by a woman? And he's actually a good example of it. He accepts it and says, well, it hurts, but I will continue to be your friend, and nothing more evil comes of that. I mean, he accepts it, and in fact, she even becomes good friends with his sister. So there's a very interesting exchange there. And although I do find it interesting that almost all the men that Blanca Olmedo rejects in this book are written as quite pathetic in their pleas. It's like, have pity on me, love me because I love you so much, and have pity on me. It's very, I don't know if this reflects more on Lucila Gamero de Medina's opinion of men, or an actual reflection of what she herself experienced when men that she wasn't interested in approached her. This very sort of pathetic, like, I don't care if you really love me, just have pity on me and love me. Well, I guess, we all know love doesn't work that way. Although I also think that the depiction of love in this book, as is my criticism of a lot of quite a few books, is a bit simplistic. So anyway, now I'll talk about just a few more things that I thought about in the book. Check it out if you're interested. Blanca Olmedo by Lucila Gamero de Medina. And the next book I will be reading, or talking about, I should say, I'm already close to halfway through it, I think, is Auto da Fe by Elias Canetti, who was born in Bulgaria, so I'm counting him for Bulgaria, even though I think he wrote in German and lived in Austria and other places. But that's always the issue with European authors, isn't it? And kind of one of the flaws of doing a Reading the World Challenge. But I would say also one of the benefits, because you can mold it to your interests in such a way that you don't get bored. As long as you really do enjoy reading a variety of things, and are okay with the occasional bad book that you don't like. So far in this project, I've only had like 5 or 6 books that I haven't liked out of the 59. So 59 countries. So if you do your research and, you kind of look into what the book's about, and you're open-minded and have an idea, you can definitely put together a solid list for Reading the World Project. Anyway, that's enough. Auto da Fe, Elias Canetti. So, some additional thoughts on Blanca Olmedo. I think the book was, again, mixed. I have mixed reactions. Like, it was easy to read, light, entertaining at times. I felt like it was way longer than it should be, personally. Like, it just dwelled way too much. Like, the conversations just kind of went on and were very repetitive. Like, oh, I love you so much. And not even just between Gustavo and Blanca Olmedo, the main relationship of the book, but between like friends and stuff. Like, oh, you're such a good friend. Oh, friendship is so nice. And maybe some people like that kind of thing in a book. I can see where it could be a comfort read type of thing. And and maybe was serving to try to build your feeling for the characters, and make you feel sad when bad things happen to them. Because, once again, this is the final spoiler warning, but does this book end in happily ever after or Romeo and Juliet tragedy? Much more a Romeo and Juliet tragedy. Blanca dies of sadness and love. Gustavo shoots himself in the heart. His Adela, the girl student, dies as well out of sickness. She was never that healthy to begin with, but the sadness of losing Blanca her teacher and best friend was enough to push it over the edge, I guess. And so the book ends with all three of our main characters, our principal characters, dying because of this conspiratorial nature between the trifecta of Doña Michaela, the evil stepmother, head of the household type of archetype, um, the evil priest, and the evil judge. All of them, well, the judge and the priest both get their just desserts. Doña Michaela is actually the character that in the end is reformed by this. And there is a very interesting character called Padre Bonilla, who's actually the good priest archetype. And he has his final conversation with Blanca Olmedo shows one of the important themes of the book, which is that religion should respond to the realities of life, not dogmatically impose unnatural restraints on people. That, like love. Love is at the center of this book. And the question is, does marriage exist in Catholicism to impose an unnatural order onto people? And he says, no. Well, it exists to prevent kind of this libertine, free reign, free love that isn't very good either. So he has a point there. But they end the conversation with the determination that, like, what we should be building is a world religion, a religion that responds to reality, to truth. And it's a very, actually, for what my personal erroneous stereotype of the time period of 1908 in Honduras, very far-seeing viewpoint, that this good priest is kind of, he doesn't really get along with the church, but he's humble. He actually lives by the message of, I believe, what most Christians consider to be the message of Jesus. He actually lives by it instead of just preaching it, and yet he preaches a world religion. So he is the example of living your faith, not imposing it, and actually seeking peace building and being flexible and adaptable, and allowing religion to change to reflect the times and the new knowledge of the world. So that was one of the best parts of the book, and in some ways redeemed for me a lot of the sort of one-dimensional characters, the repetitiveness, the overlong, kind of drawn-out, melodramatic nature of it. Again, this isn't great literature, I don't think, but it's a book worth reading for some people, for certain people, I think. And it's certainly, I think, from what I could research, one of the better choices for Honduras. It's certainly the oldest. If you're looking for, if you like historical perspective in the past, it was very easy to forget that this was written in 1908. It really did seem like a Mexican telenovela or something like that. And perhaps was even this kind of style of book was even the basis for those. I'm not sure. I'm not well versed on telenovelas from any country, so I don't know why I'm singling out Mexico here, because Colombia, of course, and all the countries have their kind of telenovelas, but as we have our soap operas in the United States. So it's that kind of story, but written in 1908 before television. So it's interesting in that sense too. Yeah, not too much more to say about it. I already mentioned all the things that were most interesting about the book to me. Ends in tragedy. Like, I wasn't particularly moved by it. It's nothing I haven't thought before. I mean, I agreed with the message of the book, though it wasn't, particularly my kind of book that I would read outside this project, or particularly great. Just mildly entertaining. I'll say it was mildly entertaining. I agreed with the message. I was surprised by a few parts. So that's it. That's Blanca Olmedo, Lucila Gamero de Medina, and look forward to the next video, and I don't think I'll be getting it up before the new year, so Happy New Year to those who celebrate the new year on January 1st. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time on Mike Reads the World.